Before we get started, please like and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from, and you can support the channel by clicking thanks or joining. I never believed that time could hesitate. I used to think it moved like gravity, silent, constant, unavoidable. No matter how bad the year was, no matter how much you begged for one more minute, midnight always came and the calendar always turned. That belief followed me into the final hours of December 31st, as I stood alone in my apartment, watching the city prepare to celebrate the future. My name is Daniel Harper. I was 34 years old that night. I lived in a narrow apartment overlooking Grant Street, a place where the buildings leaned too close together and the street lights hummed like tired insects. From my window I could see strangers laughing, clinking glasses, hugging people they loved, or people they pretended to love until the year ended. I had no plans, no party, no countdown with friends, just a bottle of cheap whiskey, a frozen dinner in the oven, and the quiet relief that this year was almost finished. The year had taken too much from me. My father died in February quietly in his sleep. My job vanished in August after a company-wide restructuring that felt less like economics and more like execution. By December, I was living on savings and silence. At 11:43, there was a knock at my door. It was not loud. It was not urgent. Just 3 gentle taps spaced carefully apart, as if whoever stood on the other side was worried about disturbing me. I checked the time on my phone before answering. 11:43 p.m., December 31st. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty. No footsteps fading, no neighbor pretending not to stare. Just the yellow hallway light and the smell of old carpet. On the floor directly in front of my door lay an envelope. It was thick, cream-colored, and heavy in a way modern mail never is. My name was written across the front in dark ink. Daniel Harper. The handwriting was careful, formal, almost old-fashioned. I looked up and down the hallway again before picking it up. There was no return address. I closed the door and locked it without thinking. Something about the envelope made the room feel colder. Not physically colder, but quieter, like sound itself was retreating. I carried it to the kitchen table and turned it over in my hands. The paper felt textured, almost fabric-like, too deliberate, too intentional. I slid a finger beneath the seal and opened it. Inside was a single card. It was an invitation. The words were printed, not typed, in a serif font that reminded me of books bound in leather and libraries that smelled of dust. You are cordially invited to a New Year gathering. At the moment, time stands still. Location Grant Street. Date January 1st, year 2025. I stared at the date. 2025. That was next year. I checked my phone again. December 31st, 2024, 11:48 p.m. The invitation felt suddenly heavier. There was no RSVP, no address beyond Grant Street, no explanation. I laughed quietly to myself, a reflex more than amusement. Probably a marketing stunt or some elaborate prank. Maybe a bar opening, maybe a strange artist project. Still, the timing bothered me. Who delivers an invitation 5 minutes before midnight to an event dated a year in the future? I set the card on the table and poured myself a drink. The whiskey burned less than I expected. My eyes kept drifting back to the invitation like it was breathing when I wasn't looking. At 11:55, my phone buzzed with a notification. Not a message, not a call, just a reminder. New Year countdown. I muted it. The oven beeped. I ignored it. Hunger had disappeared, replaced by a tightness in my chest that felt unearned. At 11:59, I found myself standing by the window again. The city held its breath. I could see people below raising phones, arms lifted, smiles frozen in anticipation. Fireworks waited in the dark like restrained animals. 10 seconds left. 9, 8, 7. I whispered the numbers without meaning to. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Nothing happened. No explosion of light. No roar of celebration. No cheers rising from the street. The digital clock on my microwave read 12:00 a.m. The second hand on my wall clock stopped. Outside, the city was perfectly still. A man on the sidewalk stood mid-step, 1 foot raised. A smile locked halfway across his face. Fireworks hung in the sky unlit, suspended like painted stars. A car horn blared and cut off abruptly like the sound had been strangled. I pressed my hand to the glass. No movement, no sound. I checked my phone. 12:00 a.m. January 1st, 2025. The date had changed. The time had not. I waited for the next minute. It did not come. Seconds passed, or at least I thought they did. The second counter on my phone did not move. The clock did not tick. Time had reached midnight and refused to continue. My breath sounded too loud in the silence. I turned back toward the table and saw the invitation lying exactly where I left it, except the ink had changed. The date now read January 1st today. A chill crawled up my spine. That was when I realized something worse. I was still moving. I lifted my hand. It trembled. I walked across the room. The floor creaked beneath my weight, a sound that echoed too long in the frozen air. Whatever had stopped time had not stopped me, and somewhere in this motionless city, an invitation waited to be answered. The first thing I noticed after the silence settled was the smell. It was not smoke or fireworks residue or cold winter air. It was the faint metallic scent of something electrical overheated and left running too long, like a room where a machine should have shut itself off but did not. I stood in the center of my apartment, listening to my own breathing, and waited for the world to correct itself. It never did. I checked every clock I own. The microwave still read 12:00 a.m. The wall clock remained frozen, its second hand trembling but unmoving. My phone showed the same time and the same date. January 1st, 2025, yet the battery indicator had not changed, not even by 1%. I tried refreshing the screen. Nothing. I turned airplane mode on and off. Nothing. I restarted the phone. The screen went black for a moment, and my heart jumped, because in that instant, I wondered if it would ever turn back on. It did. 12:00 a.m. The silence outside pressed against the windows like a weight. I could no longer hear the distant hum of the city, that constant background noise you never notice until it is gone. No engines, no wind, no dogs barking, no sirens. I opened my front door. The hallway lights were on, but they did not flicker the way they usually did. The air felt thick, like moving through water. Sound behaved strangely. My footsteps landed too softly, then echoed too loudly a moment later, as if the hallway itself was unsure when to respond. I walked to the stairwell. Mrs. Collins from 3B stood halfway down the stairs, one hand gripping the railing, the other holding her phone out in front of her. Her mouth was open, frozen mid-sentence. Her eyes stared ahead, unfocused. I waved my hand in front of her face. Nothing. I leaned closer. She was warm, not cold like a statue, warm like a living person, paused between breaths. I backed away. On the second floor landing, a delivery man stood frozen, holding a package that would never be delivered. Outside, through the stairwell window, I could see cars stopped in the middle of the intersection, headlights on engines silent. I was alone in motion. That realization settled slowly, and then all at once, crushing and heavy, I stepped outside. Grant Street was a museum of moments that would never finish happening. Confetti hung in the air like snow that forgot how to fall. A couple stood inches apart, lips almost touching, eyes closed, waiting for a kiss that would never land. Fireworks were suspended above us, black shapes against the night sky, wires dangling lifelessly. I walked between people, apologizing without knowing why. My voice sounded wrong, too loud, too present. At the corner, a police officer stood mid-stride, hand raised to his radio. His badge caught the streetlight and reflected it perfectly, unmoving. I checked my watch again out of habit. Still midnight, still January 1st, still no seconds. Panic crept in then, but not all at once. It arrived in waves. First disbelief, then confusion, then the quiet terror of understanding that if time was not moving, then neither was anyone else. Except me. I remembered the invitation. Back in my apartment, I picked it up again. The paper felt warmer now, as if it had absorbed heat from my hands or something else entirely. On the back of the card, words had appeared that were not there before. "You are early. Please wait." I dropped it. The card landed face up on the floor. The words changed again. "Time does not wait. It watches." My throat went dry. I did the only thing I could think of. I tested the rules. I turned on the sink. Water flowed normally, splashing into the basin before freezing midstream, an inch above the drain. I touched it. The water was solid like glass. I turned the faucet off. The frozen stream remained. I turned on the television. The screen lit up, then stopped on the first frame of a broadcast news anchor. Mouth open, eyes wide, ticker frozen halfway through a word. I unplugged it. The image stayed. Electricity still worked, but nothing progressed. I stepped back, shaking. The world was not paused. It was being held. That was when I noticed the lights. Down Grant Street, every street light was on, except one. Halfway down the block, a single lamp stood dark, surrounded by frozen brightness. The darkness beneath it seemed deeper, wider than it should have been. I felt pulled toward it, not emotionally, but physically, like gravity had shifted slightly in that direction. I resisted at first. I went back inside, locked my door, pushed a chair against it, like that would help. I waited. I do not know how long I waited because time had lost meaning. My thoughts stretched and folded back on themselves. Fear grew and then dulled, and then grew again, sharper. Finally, I stood up. The invitation lay on the table where I had placed it this time obediently. The back read a final message. When you are ready, follow the dark. I did not feel ready, but I knew I would go, because whatever had stopped the world had noticed me, and it was not done yet. I stepped beneath the dark streetlight and immediately felt the difference. The air there was colder, not in temperature, but in intention. It pressed against my skin with a faint vibration, like standing too close to heavy machinery. The glow from the surrounding lamps stopped at the edge of the darkness, as if light itself refused to enter fully. I looked up. The bulb was intact. No cracks, no broken glass. It simply did not shine. I raised my hand into the shadow. My fingers disappeared. Not faded, not dimmed. Gone. I pulled my hand back quickly, and my breath came out sharp and loud in the frozen street. The moment my hand left the darkness, it reappeared whole and shaking. That was when I heard it. A sound. Not loud, not close, but unmistakably present. Footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, and they did not echo. Each step landed somewhere behind me, yet no matter how I turned, I could not see anyone moving. I spun in a slow circle. The city remained frozen. The footsteps continued. I backed away from the streetlight, heart pounding until my back hit the cold metal of a parked car. The sound stopped instantly. Silence rushed back in like water filling a void. I waited. Nothing moved. I took one step forward. The footsteps returned, one step for each of mine, perfectly timed. Whatever it was moved when I moved. I remembered the invitation again, not as paper, but as a promise. Follow the dark. I forced myself to step fully beneath the streetlight. The world changed. The frozen city vanished like a curtain being pulled aside. The darkness around me thickened and stretched until Grant Street no longer existed. I stood in a long corridor lit by dim amber lights set far apart. The ground beneath my feet was smooth and reflective like polished stone, yet it felt warm. The air smelled old, not decay, but age, like books unopened for decades. I turned around. There was no street behind me, only more corridor. The footsteps resumed now clearly ahead of me. Someone was walking away. I followed. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if time itself was resisting my movement. With every footfall, the corridor subtly changed. The lights shifted position. The walls lengthened. The sound of my breathing fell out of sync with my chest. Ahead, a figure came into view. Tall, thin, wrapped in something dark that absorbed light rather than reflected it. It stopped walking. I stopped too. Slowly it turned. There was no face. Where a face should have been, there was a smooth surface like porcelain stretched tight. No eyes, no mouth, just the vague suggestion of features that had never been finished. When it spoke, the voice did not come from its head. It came from everywhere. "You are late." The words pressed into me rather than reaching my ears. My vision blurred and my knees weakened. Late for what I managed to say. The head tilted. For now, the corridor shifted again, and suddenly we were standing at a table, an impossibly long table stretching beyond sight, covered in objects, clocks, watches, calendars, hourglasses, all frozen at different moments. Some showed seconds before midnight, some minutes after, some dates years in the future. All stopped. "This is where moments are kept," the voice said. I realized then that the voice was layered multiple tones, speaking the same words, slightly out of sync. "Why me?" I asked. The faceless head turned toward me again. "Because you noticed." I looked down and saw my hands were trembling faster than before. Fine lines had appeared near my knuckles. My skin felt tighter. I was aging. Not years, not months, minutes. Every breath I took felt heavier than the last. The figure reached out. Its hand passed through my shoulder without pain. Yet I felt something pull free from me, like a thread being gently drawn out. "The world outside must remain still," the voice said. "Someone must move to mark the passing." I stumbled back. "You want me to be a clock?" I whispered. The porcelain face leaned closer. "No, a witness." The corridor lights dimmed. The table of frozen time blurred. I felt myself falling backward. When I hit the ground, I was back on Grant Street beneath the dark streetlight. The city was frozen again, but something was different. A woman across the street blinked, just once. I gasped. Time had not resumed, but it had cracked, and whatever lived in the dark had chosen me to widen the fracture. The blink spread. At first it was subtle enough that I wondered if my mind was inventing it. The woman across the street remained frozen, except for her eyes, which fluttered once more slowly, this time like a reflex remembered too late. The rest of her body stayed perfectly still, lips parted, breath locked inside her chest. I stepped toward her cautiously. With every step, the air felt thicker, heavier, as if the world itself was resisting the idea of movement near her. When I reached her side, I raised my hand inches from her face. Her pupils tracked me. That single act shattered something inside my chest. She could see me. Her eyes widened with terror, but her mouth could not scream. Her body could not run. She was trapped inside a second that refused to finish. I backed away, shaking. Across Grant Street, another person twitched. A man leaning against a lamppost flexed his fingers once, then froze again. Somewhere, glass cracked softly without falling. The fracture was spreading. I remembered the words of the faceless thing. Someone must move to mark the passing. Was that what this was? A payment being collected? Or a side effect of my existence in frozen time? I tested it. I walked closer to the man by the lamppost. His eyes rolled toward me slowly, painfully aware. A vein pulsed in his neck, but his chest did not rise. He was alive, but trapped. I stumbled back, overwhelmed by the weight of it. Every step I took, every second I experienced was pulling others partially free and leaving them stranded between moments. I was not a witness. I was a contaminant. I ran. The sound of my footsteps echoed too loudly through the frozen street. Each impact sent tiny ripples through the stillness like cracks spreading through ice. Windows trembled. A parked car alarm flickered, soundless lights flashing without motion. I stopped breathing hard, heart racing. If I kept moving, the city would tear itself apart. I forced myself to stand still. Nothing changed. The people I had disturbed remained half awake, eyes darting silently, begging without words. Staying still did not fix it. The invitation burned in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands. The front remained unchanged, but the back had new text. Movement has consequence. Stillness has cost. My vision blurred. What cost? The card felt heavier than ever, as if it were pulling me downward. I understood then. Time was not broken. It was being rationed. Every moment I experienced had to be taken from somewhere else. I had stolen seconds from the people around me. I fell to my knees in the middle of Grant Street, surrounded by frozen faces and half-moving eyes. I whispered apologies no one could hear. A sound answered me. Not footsteps this time, but a low, grinding noise, like massive gears turning far underground. The streetlight flickered. For the first time since midnight, light pulsed across Grant Street, dimming then returning. Somewhere a firework ignited. It exploded silently, frozen mid-bloom, but its light remained, casting sharp shadows that did not fade. Time was trying to restart, and failing. The ground beneath my hands felt warm. Cracks spidered across the asphalt, glowing faintly amber like the corridor lights from before. I scrambled back. The cracks widened. From them leaked shadows thicker than darkness, stretching upward and reaching toward the frozen people. No, 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 I whispered. This was not meant to happen. The faceless thing had warned me, but not guided me. I understood now why it had said I was late. This was not the beginning. This was the aftermath. I looked up at the dark street light. Its shadow had grown, spreading far beyond its base, reaching toward me like a long arm. I stood. If movement caused damage, then I needed to choose where to move. I walked deliberately toward the street light, ignoring the cries in the eyes around me. With every step, the cracks behind me slowed, then stopped as if pulled back. The darkness wanted me. As I reached the edge of the shadow, the invitation crumbled in my hand, turning to dust that drifted upward instead of falling. A final message burned into my vision. Choose where time breaks. I stepped into the dark. Behind me, the city groaned. Ahead, something waited, and for the first time since midnight, I felt time breathe. The darkness did not feel empty. As soon as I stepped fully into the shadow of the streetlight, the noise of the city vanished completely. Not even silence remained. It was replaced by something denser, like pressure inside my skull. I felt watched from every direction. Yet there was no single presence to focus on. Time inhaled. That was the only way I could describe it. A slow, deliberate pull, as if the universe itself were drawing breath and waiting to see what I would do next. When I stepped forward, the frozen city behind me blurred like a reflection disturbed by water. Grant Street faded until it was no longer solid memory replacing reality. I stood in a narrow space that resembled an alley but wrong. The walls were too smooth, too close together, and they curved slightly inward, as if leaning to listen. Dim lines of light ran along the ground like veins glowing softly with that same amber color I had seen beneath the street. This place was between moments. I felt it immediately in my body. My joints ached. My vision sharpened painfully. I could hear my heartbeat loud and irregular, like it was struggling to keep pace with something faster. I looked down at my hands. The skin around my knuckles was thinner now, translucent enough that veins showed dark and branching beneath. Age was no longer subtle. The cost was accelerating. I laughed weakly, the sound swallowed instantly by the space around me. "So this is how it works," I whispered. The walls answered with a vibration, not words but acknowledgement. I walked forward slowly, afraid of what another step might take from me. With each movement I felt seconds peel away from my body, not metaphorically but physically, like weight leaving my bones. Ahead, the alley opened into a wider chamber. Someone stood there. A boy no older than 16, frozen mid-step, one sneaker, lifted eyes wide with confusion. He wore a party hat tilted awkwardly to one side and clutched a phone in his hand, the screen still glowing with a half-written message. "Help me." The word was not spoken, but I felt it press against my thoughts. I froze. This was new. He could think. I circled him carefully. His eyes followed me, fully aware, panic building in them like a rising tide. I remembered what had happened to the others, the blinking, the twitching, the terror trapped without escape. If I stayed near him, he would suffer. If I moved away, he would remain forever. I knelt in front of him, ignoring the sharp pain in my knees. "Can you hear me?" I asked. A single tear slid down his cheek, impossibly slow. I understood. Somewhere inside this fracture, time still flowed just enough for fear to grow. I reached out. The moment my fingers touched his sleeve, agony ripped through my arm. My vision exploded with light. And for a split second I saw decades layered over one another. My face older, thinner eyes hollow, staring back at me. I screamed. The boy gasped. Air rushed into his lungs violently, and he collapsed forward, sobbing. Time had moved. Just for him, the cost hit immediately. My heart stuttered. Pain lanced through my chest, and my left hand curled inward. Fingers locking into a claw. I collapsed beside him, gasping. The boy scrambled backward, staring at me in horror. "What did you do to me?" he shouted, his voice echoing unnaturally. Before I could answer, the chamber shook. The walls pulsed. A familiar grinding sound rolled through the space, deeper and louder than before. I knew that sound now. Disapproval. The boy vanished, not faded, removed. The chamber snapped back into darkness, and I was alone. I lay there, shaking, my body heavy, wrong older. A voice pressed into the space around me, layered and vast. "One is not worth the fracture." I forced myself onto my elbows. "You said someone had to move," I whispered. "Yeah, but not choose." I laughed bitterly, blood on my lips. "Then why show me him?" The silence stretched. "Because you will do it again." The truth of that settled into my bones, heavier than any pain. They were right. I would, because leaving people trapped between seconds was worse than dying early. The darkness shifted. A path opened ahead. glowing faintly. I pushed myself up, ignoring the numbness creeping through my arm. I would pay the cost, but I would decide who it was paid for. And somewhere beyond this place, time was already beginning to break. I did not know how long I walked. In the space between moments, distance behaved strangely. A few steps felt like miles, while long stretches passed in what felt like seconds stolen from my body. My breath grew shallow. Every inhale scraped my lungs as if the air itself were aging along with me. The path of amber light led me forward, unwavering. With each step, memories surfaced. Uninvited moments from my life that felt heavier, now sharper. My father's laugh at the kitchen table, the smell of rain on hot pavement during my first job interview, a woman I almost married standing in a doorway asking me to stay. Each memory faded as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind a dull ache, like something removed without anesthesia. I realized then that time was not only being taken from my body, it was being taken from my past. When the path ended, I stood in a vast open chamber, unlike the narrow space before. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, lost in darkness. Beneath it stood shapes, tall and unmoving, arranged in a wide circle. They were not identical. Some were thin and elongated like shadows pulled upright. Others were broad, heavy forms with surfaces that looked cracked like dried earth. A few appeared almost human until you noticed the absence of faces, or the way their outlines never stayed still. These were not one, they were many. I felt their attention settle on me all at once. The pressure in my skull intensified until my vision swam. My knees buckled, but I forced myself to remain standing. You continue to move. The voices overlapped, not layered like before, but divided, some deep, some sharp, some distant. You continue to choose. I swallowed. You told me someone had to, I said. A ripple passed through the circle. Correction. One must bear passage, not interfere. The memory of the boy flashed through me, his eyes, his breath returning for that brief moment. He was alive, I said. For seconds, one voice replied. Then, unmade, another followed. Your choice increased instability. I felt anger flare through the fear. You showed him to me. A pause. Deliberate. We test boundaries. I laughed harshly, and I am the boundary. A shape stepped forward. It was taller than the others. Its form, smoother, almost reflective like dark glass. As it moved, the ground beneath it shimmered with faint clock-like markings. You are degrading faster than projected, it said. Your body cannot sustain extended passage. I looked down at my hands again. My fingers trembled uncontrollably now. My left hand remained partially clenched, refusing to open fully. A dull numbness crept up my arm. How long do I have? I asked. The circle shifted, undefined, dependent on resistance, on choice. I understood. The more I fought, the faster I would decay. The more I saved, the less of me would remain. What happens when I'm gone? I asked. A low sound rolled through the chamber. Time resumes. The fractures seal. Witness removed. The word witness echoed unpleasantly. And the people trapped, I asked. Those partially displaced will complete their moments, one said. Some will not remember. Some will remember too much, said another. A thin shape tilted toward me, and some will notice the absence. Cold dread settled in my stomach. Missing people, unexplained gaps. Years later, whispers and theories and unresolved grief. This was not a clean correction. This was damage control. I straightened as much as my failing body allowed. Then let me choose again. No. The answer was immediate. Choice is the fracture. I smiled despite the pain. Then you picked the wrong man. For the first time, something like hesitation passed through the circle. The amber path behind me flickered. I felt time pull at me urgently like a tide reversing. The chamber began to blur. Return, one voice commanded. Observation complete. I stumbled backward. The darkness folded in on itself and the pressure vanished. I fell hard. I hit cold pavement. Grant Street. The frozen city snapped back into view, but it was worse. More eyes moved now. Dozens, hundreds. People trapped in half seconds, muscles twitching. Tears sliding, impossibly slow expressions locked in terror. My presence had weakened the boundary further. I pushed myself up with shaking arms. I could feel my heart struggling, misfiring beats out of rhythm. I did not have much time. If time was going to break, then it would break around me. And if they would not let me choose, I would force them to watch. I staggered forward into the frozen crowd, already planning my next defiance. I moved through the frozen crowd like a ghost among statues. Every step sent tremors through my body. My vision pulsed in and out of focus, and the edges of the world bled amber, as if reality itself were bruising. Faces surrounded me, hundreds of them, locked in fear, confusion, joy, surprise, all arrested at the moment. Time failed. Their eyes followed me, not all at once, not immediately, but as I passed, more of them awakened just enough to see. A woman clutching a champagne glass watched me with silent pleading. A man mid-laugh slowly realized he could not finish the sound. A child standing on tiptoe near his parents began to shake with restrained sobs, his cheeks wet with tears that refused to fall. This was my fault. Every breath I took, every second I experienced, tore more people loose from the safety of stillness and stranded them in awareness. The entities had warned me. Choice is the fracture. I chose anyway. At the center of the intersection, a city bus stood frozen, its doors open, passengers half-stepping out into the new year. I felt drawn to it not by instinct, but by memory. I remembered riding buses with my father when I was young, his large hand steady on the pole, his voice explaining the city to me, as if it were a living thing. That memory flickered. The sound of his voice slipped away like water through my fingers. I froze. No. I pressed my hand to my head, gasping. The memory was gone, not faded, erased. I knew it with terrible certainty. My father's face blurred in my mind, replaced by an empty outline where something vital had been. Time was not only taking my future, it was consuming my past to pay for my defiance. I staggered forward, clutching my chest. The bus groaned. Metal screamed silently as the vehicle shuddered against invisible resistance. I had found a pressure point. If I forced movement here where many lives intersected, the fracture would widen violently. I hesitated. The eyes around me begged. I remembered the boy. I remembered the entity's words. One is not worth the fracture, but how many would be? I placed my hand against the side of the bus. Agony tore through me. My vision exploded into layered timelines, flashing past too fast to process. Streets, aging buildings, collapsing people, growing old and dying in seconds. I screamed. The bus lurched forward inches. A woman fell out onto the pavement, gasping, sobbing, screaming as sound returned to her body in a flood. Others followed. Time rippled outward violently. The intersection convulsed. Glass shattered. Fireworks detonated soundlessly, then burst into deafening noise all at once. People collapsed, vomiting, crying, screaming in terror. And then it stopped. Time slammed back into stillness like a door being violently shut. I lay on the ground, barely conscious, my body racked with pain. My left arm was numb, useless. I could not feel my fingers. Above me, the sky fractured, thin glowing lines, splitting the night like cracks in glass. The entity's presence crushed down on me heavier than ever. This is unacceptable. Their voices roared, not layered, but unified. My vision darkened. I tasted blood. You forced a cascade. I laughed weakly. You said time would resume. For a moment it did. That moment cost thousands. I felt something inside me tear. A memory surfaced unbidden. My father teaching me to ride a bike, his hand steadying the seat. It vanished mid-thought. Gone. I screamed again, not from pain, but from loss. Stop, I begged. The pressure intensified. Your resistance accelerates collapse. Then end me, I whispered. Another pause, longer this time. If you are removed now, the fracture remains unstable, one voice said. Another followed. The damage is done. I realized then the truth. They needed me alive, not as a witness, as a buffer, a living fault line absorbing the strain of broken time. I coughed blood onto the pavement. How long? Undefined. Until equilibrium, which could mean never. I closed my eyes. Faces flickered behind my lids, people half awake, terrified forever, scarred by what they would never fully remember. I opened my eyes again. Then I will keep breaking it. The pressure shifted. Something like fear passed through them. Because if time was going to scar the world either way, I would choose where the scars formed. The sky above Grant Street groaned. Time was no longer holding. It was starting to scream. I did not notice her at first. My vision swam in slow, painful pulses, and every sound arrived delayed, as if the air itself were tired. The pressure of the entities still hovered above Grant Street, but it had shifted from crushing weight to cold observation. They were watching now, not intervening. Someone was standing in front of me, moving fully. She was a woman in her early 30s, dark hair, pulled back, a long coat hanging open as if she had been walking when the world stopped. Her chest rose and fell normally. Her eyes were clear-focused and locked on mine. "Daniel," she said, hearing my name spoken aloud in this broken world nearly shattered me. "You can see me?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "I have been watching you since you touched the bus." Her voice trembled, but she was not frozen. Time flowed for her. "Who are you?" I whispered. Her brow furrowed. "You do not remember." The words struck harder than any pain. She took a careful step closer. "It's Claire." Nothing. The name meant nothing. I searched my mind desperately and found only blank space where a face should have been. "I'm sorry," I said. Her eyes filled with tears. "They took you too," she whispered. I wanted to ask what she meant, but a memory surfaced unbidden, her laugh echoing in a small apartment, a mug of coffee steaming between her hands. It vanished before I could grasp it. I screamed. The entities stirred. "Recognition increases fracture," one of them warned. Claire flinched. "They talk to you?" she asked. I nodded. She looked around at the frozen city, the half-moving people, the cracked sky. "I woke up 10 minutes ago," she said. "Everything was stopped, but I could move. When I saw you, I knew you were the reason." I laughed bitterly. "You should run." She shook her head. "They won't let me go. Every time I move too far, I feel them pull. A living anchor. Like me." The realization settled with cold clarity. They had made more than one buffer. "Why you?" I asked. She swallowed. "Because I tried to stop it last year." I stared. "What?" "Last New Year," she said. "Something happened. Not like this. Smaller." A pause. I noticed it and tried to pull my sister out of it. Her voice broke. She never came back. The world snapped back and everyone else forgot, except me. And now you. The entities pressed closer. "The fracture seeks balance. 2 witnesses create resonance. We must resolve." I felt panic rise. "What does that mean?" Claire reached for my hand. "Don't let them separate us," she said. The moment our fingers touched, warmth surged through me, painful and bright. Time surged. The city lurched violently. Frozen people screamed as sound burst from their throats before cutting off again. Fireworks roared, then froze mid-echo. The sky split wider. The entities recoiled. "Contact is prohibited." I held on to Claire despite the pain. My heart raced erratically, my vision tunneling. If 2 of us can move, then maybe 2 of us can choose. Claire met my eyes. "Then choose now." I looked around. Everywhere I stood, time broke. But where she stood, it flowed more cleanly. She was different, less damaged. I knew what they wanted. They wanted one of us removed permanently to stabilize the fracture. I shook my head violently. "No." Claire smiled sadly. "I've lived with the memory for a year," she said. "You're still losing yours." She leaned close. "Tell them to take me." I screamed. "No." She squeezed my hand. "Someone has to be forgotten." The entities' voices merged into a single directive. Offer accepted. Light tore through the street. Claire vanished, not erased, resolved. Time slammed back into stillness. I collapsed, sobbing, clutching empty air. I knew then exactly what had been taken. I could no longer remember why I loved her, only that I had, and the fracture closed slightly, leaving a scar shaped like her absence. Time returned wrong. I knew it the moment sound came back, not as a rush, but as a staggered echo. Screams arrived seconds late. Fireworks finished exploding after they had already faded. The city lurched forward like a machine restarting after a power surge. People collapsed to the ground, gasping, clutching each other, vomiting, crying, laughing hysterically. Phones rang all at once. Alarms blared. Car engines roared and stalled. January 1st had begun, but it was broken. I lay on the pavement, unable to move my left arm, my chest burning with each shallow breath. Above me, the sky looked normal again. No cracks, no glowing fractures yet. Something felt thinner, like a layer had been peeled away. Someone knelt beside me, a man in a heavy coat, shaking eyes wild. "Are you okay?" he asked. His voice sounded too loud, too close. I nodded weakly. He helped me sit up. Around us, people tried to understand what had happened. Many looked confused. Others terrified. A few stared at nothing, eyes unfocused, as if searching for something they could not name. I felt it then, the absence, a hollow space inside me shaped like a person whose face I could not see. Claire. The name surfaced without context. My chest tightened. Who is Claire? The question terrified me more than the broken city. "Sir," the man said gently, "you were screaming a name." "Claire." He froze. His grip tightened on my shoulder. "You too," he whispered. I looked at him. "What?" "I remember her," he said, voice shaking. "I don't know how, but I do. Everyone else says there was no one there. But I remember her standing next to you." Cold spread through me. The entity's words echoed. "Some will notice the absence." I was not alone. Ambulances arrived. Paramedics rushing through the crowd, sirens blaring out of sync. They lifted me onto a stretcher, my vision swimming as the world tilted. As they wheeled me away, I looked back at Grant Street. Most people were moving normally now, but a few still lagged half a step behind. Reality movements delayed eyes tracking something unseen. Fracture survivors at the hospital time behaved oddly. Clocks ticked, but minutes stretched long, then vanished. Nurses repeated themselves unaware. Doctors forgot questions they had just asked. I drifted in and out of consciousness, haunted by the feeling that something essential had been cut from my life. When I woke fully, it was afternoon, January 1st. Sunlight poured through the window, too bright, too normal. A woman sat beside my bed. She was older hair streaked with gray lines of exhaustion etched deep into her face. She held my hand tightly. "Daniel," she said. "Mom." The word came automatically. Relief flooded her expression. "Thank God," she whispered. She hesitated. "Do you remember last night?" I shook my head. "Not clearly." She nodded as if expecting that. "They say you collapsed during the countdown," she said. "Some kind of mass panic event. People blacked out. Hallucinations." She swallowed. "But you were calling for someone." "Claire." My heart pounded. "I don't know who that is," I said. She looked away. "I do." The room felt colder. "You told me about her last year," my mother said quietly, "after the New Year incident. You said she saved you from something you couldn't explain." My mouth went dry. "I don't remember that." She squeezed my hand. "Neither does anyone else." That night I was discharged. Grant Street looked almost normal when I returned. Almost. One streetlight flickered at the center of the block, though no one else seemed to notice. As I passed beneath it, A whisper brushed my thoughts. Balance is incomplete. I stopped. My chest tightened. You remain. I looked up at the dark bulb. I did not answer. I walked on, knowing the truth. Time had resumed, but it had not finished with me, and somewhere something was still counting. The first message arrived at exactly 12:17 a.m., not as a sound, not as a voice. It appeared as a sensation, like a pressure behind my eyes, followed by words that were not seen but understood. You are misaligned. I sat upright in my bed, gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs. The hospital room was quiet, except for the soft beep of a monitor and the distant murmur of voices in the hallway. I looked at the clock. 12:17 a.m., January 1st. Time was moving, but it was watching me. I closed my eyes. Go away, I whispered. The pressure eased, but did not leave. You persist. Sleep did not come again that night. Each time my thoughts slowed, the sensation returned subtle, insistent, like fingers tapping against the inside of my skull. At dawn, I was discharged. By noon, the city was buzzing with speculation news crews, filming confused revelers, social media flooding with theories. Officials called it a synchronized panic event, caused by fireworks and crowd psychology. I knew better. On my way home, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, I answered before thinking. Daniel. The voice was wrong. Flat, layered, familiar. My knees weakened. Don't say it, I whispered. Claire. The name landed like a wound reopening. You retain prohibited memory. I stopped walking. People flowed around me unaware. Why are you doing this? I asked. Because balance remains incomplete. I laughed hollowly. You took her. Correction. We resolved her. You continue to destabilize. I felt anger rise. Then fix it. A pause. There is a solution. I waited. Return. The word echoed. Return where? To us. The street light flickered overhead, though it was midday. Your presence anchors residual fracture. You may complete resolution by re-entering observation. My mouth went dry. You want me to come back? Yes. Alone. I thought of my mother, the man who remembered Claire, the lagging survivors. And Claire. What happens if I don't? The pressure intensified sharply. Instability spreads. People will notice more absences. More will remember. More will break. This was not a threat. It was a statement of physics. I sank onto a bench, my hands shaking. If I go back, will they be safe? Temporal variance acceptable. Meaning, they will live. Most will forget. You will not. I closed my eyes. I knew what they were offering. Eternal witnesshood. An existence outside progression. Watching time flow without participating. A living correction. When? Tonight, midnight, Grant Street. The call ended. The world felt thinner again. As evening fell, I walked the city one last time, watching people celebrate, unaware of how close everything had come to breaking forever. At 11:59 p.m., I stood beneath the streetlight. It was dark. The city held its breath again. I felt the familiar pull. Behind me, someone spoke. Daniel. I turned. The man from the night before, the one who remembered Claire, stood there. They called you too, he said. I nodded. I'm sorry. He shook his head. Don't be. He stepped back. Tell her we remember. The streetlight went out. Darkness rose, and time waited for my answer. I did not answer the darkness right away. The streetlight remained unlit, but the space beneath it felt crowded, as if something vast were waiting just beyond sight. The city around me breathed. Normally, cars passed, music spilled from open windows, laughter echoed from bars, already forgetting the fear of the night before. They had no idea how close they had come to never moving again. The man who remembered Claire stood a few steps away, watching me carefully. "You do not have to do this," he said. I almost believed him. If I walked away, if I pretended none of it was real, maybe the voices would fade, maybe the pressure would lift, maybe time would forget me the way it forgot her. But I already knew the truth. It was not about what I wanted. It was about what time would tolerate. I stepped closer to the streetlight. The air thickened immediately, the familiar pressure blooming behind my eyes. "Daniel," the voices returned softer, now coaxing. "You understand consequence." I swallowed. "If I go back," I said, "will the fractures stop?" A pause. "They will stabilize. And the people who remember." Another pause longer. "They will forget. Except you." I looked back at the man. "What happens to him?" "He will forget by morning." The man frowned, rubbing his temples as if already sensing something slipping away. I felt anger rise again. "You promised balance," I said. "Balance requires sacrifice." "Always me." "You were available." The answer chilled me more than any threat. Availability. Wrong place, wrong moment, wrong second. I closed my eyes. Images flickered through my mind. Memories already thinning. My father's face, my mother's smile, Claire's laugh, all fraying at the edges. If I go back, will I ever come out? No. The word landed final. Observation is permanent. Time does not need witnesses who leave. I laughed quietly. "Figures." I turned to the man. "They are going to make you forget her," I said. He shook his head, confused. "Forget who?" My chest tightened. "It is already starting." I stepped forward and hugged him briefly, surprised by how solid he felt, how real. "Remember this feeling," I whispered. He did not understand. I released him and stepped fully beneath the streetlight. The world folded. The city peeled away layer by layer, sound first, then color, then space, until only pressure remained. I stood once more in the chamber between moments. The entities surrounded me, their forms sharper, now more defined. "You accept resolution," one said. I nodded. "Then observe." Time rushed past me violently. I saw Grant Street restart, replaying the moment again and again. New Year fireworks, laughter, confusion fading into memory. I saw years pass. Buildings renovated, closed, reopened. People grew older, fell in love. Had children died. Time flowed around me, but never through me. I remained unchanged, locked outside progression, my body preserved, my mind forced to watch. The cost revealed itself slowly. Memories continued to erode. Faces blurred, names slipped away. Even emotions dulled, leaving impressions without context. I remembered loving someone. I no longer remembered who. The entities watched silently. This was equilibrium. This was the price. And somewhere far away, time continued moving because I no longer did. I learned how to measure eternity in small things. At first, I tried to count. Seconds meant nothing here. Minutes did not exist, and years collapsed into meaningless loops. Time rushed past me in violent waves, while I remained fixed, an unmoving anchor in an endless current. Instead, I learned to count changes. A crack in a sidewalk widening by a fraction. A tree growing taller, then dying, then being replaced. A child born carried past my view, then returning years later taller with a different face. I stood between moments, watching the world breathe. The entities rarely spoke now. Their presence was constant but distant, like wardens, confident their prisoner could not escape. I felt them when fractures stabilized, and when subtle imbalances trembled across reality like distant earthquakes. Observation was not passive. Every time time strained, I felt it pull against me, testing the limits of my endurance. Pressure built behind my eyes. My joints stiffened. My thoughts slowed. This was the hidden cost. I was not frozen. I was eroding. Memories continued to vanish quietly. At first, they were personal faces, names, voices. Then emotions dulled. Love became recognition. Grief became an abstract weight without source. I knew I had lost someone important. I no longer knew why that mattered. The first sign of the lie came on the anniversary, January 1st again. The city celebrated. Fireworks burst. Laughter filled the streets, and for a moment everything looked normal. Then I saw it. A woman standing alone on Grant Street, staring directly at me. She was not frozen. She was not moving. She was waiting. Her eyes were familiar in a way that hurt. The entities stirred. Anomaly detected. I tried to look away, but could not. She stepped forward. Each step she took made the air vibrate violently. Time warped around her footsteps, bending inward. "Daniel," she said softly. The sound tore through me like glass. I did not know her, but my body reacted. Pain bloomed in my chest. My hands shook uncontrollably. "You should not be here," one of the entities warned. She smiled sadly. "Neither should he." She looked at me. "They did not finish the repair," she said. I tried to speak, but my voice failed. Fragments surged. Coffee mugs, laughter, shared silence, understanding without words. Claire. The name returned like a wound reopening. The entities closed in. Memory resurgence accelerates instability. I staggered. "You promised she was resolved," I whispered. She nodded. She stepped closer, but they underestimated what absence does. I felt something inside me unlock. Memories flooded back painfully, incomplete but alive. "You are not a witness," she said to me. "You are a scar." The ground beneath us trembled. Time buckled. The entities' voices rose urgent. "Containment breach." Claire reached out. When her hand touched mine, time screamed. The city around us froze, mid-celebration, fireworks hanging silent again. But this time I did not freeze. Neither did she. "They lied to you," she said quickly. Balance is not restoration, it is postponement. The entities pressed inward. Release him, one commanded. Claire shook her head. No. The fracture is anchored to him now. You cannot close it without destroying everything you preserved. Silence. They knew it was true. What happens now, I asked. Claire smiled sadly. Now time must choose. The pressure vanished. For the first time since midnight long ago, I felt time hesitate. And somewhere deep within the machinery of reality, a countdown began again. The countdown did not sound. It manifested. I felt it as a pressure deep in my bones, a rhythmic tightening and release like a pulse that did not belong to my body. The world around Grant Street wavered. Colors bending, shadows stretching, then snapping back into place. Claire stood beside me, unchanged, while everything else trembled. This is where it breaks, she said quietly. I looked around. People were moving again, but not correctly. Some repeated the same motion over and over, lifting a glass, lowering it, lifting it again, trapped in short loops. Others skipped seconds, entire conversations, jumping ahead without warning. Time was stuttering. The entities formed a loose ring around us, their shapes unstable, flickering between forms. Negotiation initiated, one voice declared. We do not negotiate, Claire replied. We correct. The ground split open at our feet, revealing layers of moments stacked beneath. Reality flashes of Grant Street at different times, different years, different states of decay. I saw myself among them, standing beneath the streetlight, younger, older, screaming, silent, watching. All versions tethered to this point. You anchored the fracture, the entities said to me. Removal will collapse all dependent timelines. I understood then. I was no longer a witness. I was infrastructure. If I was erased, everything connected to me would fall with me. How many people, I asked? Undefined. Potentially all. Claire took my hand. They cannot remove you, she said. They can only ask. The pressure intensified. Proposed solution, one voice said. Temporal rollback. Rollback to when? To 1 year prior, before primary fracture. My heart raced. Erase everything that happened this year. Yes. All memories, actions, consequences removed. The city would forget the pause, the fractures, the losses, including Claire. She squeezed my hand once. They mean me too, she said. If we go back, I will be erased completely. No sacrifice, no scar. No turn. I looked at her, and me. You would return to normal time unaware. Alive. I laughed bitterly. That is their mercy. The entities waited. Time screamed louder now. Windows cracking, alarms blaring, stopping, starting. If I refuse, I asked. Cascade. Failure. One voice said, time collapses outward from this point. Global extinction. The choice was not a choice. I closed my eyes. Images flashed. The boy I saved briefly. The man who remembered Claire. My mother, my father. Faces blurred, fading. I opened my eyes. Do it! Claire exhaled slowly. "Remember me," she whispered. I tried to burn her into my mind. Her face, her voice, the way she said my name. The entities raised something like hands. Rollback initiated. The world tore apart. I felt myself splitting memories, peeling away like skin. The countdown reached 0, and everything went white. I woke to the sound of fireworks. Real fireworks. Loud, chaotic, joyful. The kind that rattled windows and made people cheer instead of scream. For a moment, I lay still, confused by the weight of my own body, the steady rhythm of my breathing, the simple fact that my heart beat without pain. The ceiling above me was familiar cracked paint, a faint water stain shaped like a continent. My apartment, Grant Street. I reached for my phone. 11:59 p.m. December 31st. The year had not changed. The reset had worked. Outside the city counted down, voices rising together, laughter spilling across the street. The past year pressed against my skull like a dream slipping away too fast to hold. I sat up. Something felt wrong. Not fear, not dread. Absence. I swung my legs out of bed and stood. My joints moved easily, no stiffness, no ache. Whatever price had been paid, it had not been carved into my body. It had been carved somewhere else. The knock came at my door. 3 gentle taps. My blood ran cold. I checked the time again. 11:59 p.m. I opened the door. The hallway was empty. On the floor lay an envelope. Cream-colored, heavy, familiar. My name written in careful ink. Daniel Harper. My hands shook as I picked it up. I knew this. I closed the door and locked it, heart pounding. Inside the envelope was an invitation. You are cordially invited to a New Year gathering. At the moment, time stands still. Location, Grant Street. Date, January 1st. Year, 2025. I stared. 2025. Next year, the memory tried to surface. A woman, a voice, a choice. Nothing came. Outside, the countdown reached 1. Fireworks exploded. The calendar turned. January 1st. Time moved. I waited. Nothing froze. No silence. Pause. Relief washed through me, so powerful my knees weakened. It was over, or so I thought. As the fireworks faded, I noticed something on the invitation, a faint smudge where another name had once been written. Not mine, a shape of letters pressed into the paper too deeply to erase. I traced it with my thumb. My chest tightened for no reason I could explain. I folded the invitation and set it on the table. The night passed normally. People celebrated, slept, woke with hangovers and resolutions. Life continued, but the absence remained. In the following weeks, I noticed small things. A woman at the coffee shop who seemed to recognize me, then looked confused. A song on the radio that made my chest ache without memory. A dream of standing beside someone I could not see, and always the feeling that something had been left behind. One evening, weeks later, I walked down Grant Street. The streetlight flickered. Just once, I stopped. A whisper brushed my thoughts. Balance restored. I shivered as I walked on. I did not notice the second envelope resting beneath the streetlight. addressed to someone who no longer existed, and dated 1 year from now. The first sign was the calendar. I noticed it on a Tuesday morning weeks after the reset while drinking burnt coffee and scrolling mindlessly through my phone. The date read January 9th. Yet the wall calendar across from my kitchen table still showed December 31st. I frowned. I clearly remembered tearing the page away after New Year. I even remembered the sound of paper ripping, the small satisfaction of leaving the old year behind. Except that memory felt thin. I stood and crossed the room. The page was intact. December 31st. I reached out and touched it. The paper was warm. I pulled my hand back as if burned. That same day, someone else received an invitation. I did not know her. Her name was Emily Carter. She lived 3 blocks from Grant Street in a narrow townhouse filled with houseplants and unfinished art projects. She had plans for the future, the kind of plans that required believing time would behave. At 11:48 p.m. she heard a knock, 3 gentle taps. When she opened the door, the hallway was empty. On the floor lay an envelope, cream-colored, heavy, her name written in careful ink, Emily Carter. She hesitated longer than I had, but curiosity won. Inside the envelope was an invitation. You are cordially invited to a New Year gathering. At the moment, time stands still. Location, Grant Street. Date, January 1st. Year, 2025. She laughed nervously. A prank, she thought. An art installation. She set it aside and forgot about it until midnight. At exactly 12 a.m., every clock in her apartment froze. The television cut to static. The city outside fell silent. Emily stood alone, moving in a world that refused to follow. Across town, I woke with a scream. The dream clung to me, choking and vivid. A woman standing under a streetlight, her face hidden in shadow, an invitation burning in her hand. My heart pounded. I checked the time, 3:12 a.m., January 9th. The calendar across the room still read December 31st. I stumbled out of bed. My chest hurt, not physically, emotionally, like something remembered too late. I walked to the window. Grant Street lay quiet, normal, peaceful, except for the street light. It was dark. I whispered without knowing why. Do not answer it. The whisper did not come from me. Elsewhere, Emily touched the frozen glass of her window and gasped. She could move. The world could not. She thought of the invitation. She picked it up. The ink had changed. The date now read January 1st today. A second name appeared beneath hers, pressed deep into the paper. Daniel Harper. I screamed again, miles away, clutching my head. Memories surged. Claire, the chamber, the choice, the reset. I remembered everything. Too late. The entities stirred. A new anchor has formed. Balance requires transfer. I understood then. The loop had not been broken. It had been deferred. I grabbed my coat and ran toward Grant Street, toward the streetlight, toward the moment time would stop again. Because this time, I was not going to let her face it alone. I reached Grant Street as the city fell silent again. Not gradually, not hesitantly, instantly. One breath, the world was alive with distant sirens and late-night traffic. The next, it was a still image, a paused film frame stretched across the night. Snowflakes hung suspended inches inches from the ground. Headlights froze mid-glare, and a shout cut off mid-syllable. Midnight. Again. I staggered beneath the dark streetlight, gasping my chest tight with memory and dread. This time there was no confusion, no disbelief. I knew exactly what was happening. Emily stood a few feet away, staring at her hands. They moved. She looked up at me, eyes wide. "I can move," she whispered. I nodded. "So can I." She flinched. "You know what's happening?" "Yes," I said. "And you shouldn't have to face it alone." She looked around at the frozen street, panic rising. "What is this?" "Time stopped," I said. "Or more accurately, it is being held." Her breathing quickened. "By who?" I hesitated. "By something that fixes mistakes, by breaking people." The streetlight flickered. The air thickened. I felt it before I saw it. Someone else stood beneath the light. A man. My stomach dropped. He was younger, thinner, his hair darker, his face untouched by the weight of what I remembered. He was me. From last year, from before the reset. He stared at us, confused, frightened, clutching an envelope in his hand. I stepped back. "This was not supposed to happen. You are intersecting iterations," one of the entities said. The voice vibrated through the street. Containment compromised. The younger me looked at me. "Who are you?" he demanded. I swallowed. "Your future." He laughed nervously. "This is a joke." I wanted to warn him. I wanted to tell him to run, to refuse the invitation to burn it and leave the city. But I remembered. It would not work. Emily stared between us. "There are two of you." I nodded. "And that is bad." The entity's presence intensified, shadows bending toward the streetlight. "One anchor must be selected." Emily clutched my arm. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said slowly, "that only one of us can continue moving." The younger me stepped back. "What are you talking about?" I met his eyes. "You have a choice," I said. I didn't. The entities pulsed. Selection required. The younger me shook his head. "No, no, no." Emily spoke suddenly. "Take him," she said, pointing at the younger me. "Take the one who doesn't know yet." I turned to her. "Emily, no." She looked at me with fierce clarity. "You remember. You chose once. You came back." She swallowed. "Let me help you finish." The younger me stared at her. "Finish what?" The entities shifted. Proposal detected. Transfer of anchor possible. My heart raced. "If I take his place, he will be erased from this iteration," Emily said, "and time will stabilize." "Yes," the entities replied. The younger me looked at me, eyes wide. "You would do that?" I closed my eyes. I already did. I stepped forward. "Take me." The street groaned. Temporal transfer initiated. The younger me screamed. Emily grabbed my hand. "Don't forget me," she said. I squeezed back. "I won't, even if time tries." Light surged. Pain exploded, and the world split again. I did not feel myself leave. There was no sensation of falling or rising, only separation, like a thought being pulled out mid-sentence. One moment I was gripping Emily's hand, feeling her warmth and fear. The next I was nowhere that could could be named. Then I understood. I was between observations. Time no longer rushed past me. It did not flow at all. It existed as layers, stacked infinitely thin, each one vibrating with potential. I could see moments without entering them, like pages pressed together in a book that refused to open. Below me, Grant Street replayed itself. The street light, the younger me screaming, Emily shouting my name. I could not answer. My voice no longer reached that layer. The entities surrounded me more clearly than ever before. Their forms sharpened into something almost geometric, edges folding in on themselves, surfaces reflecting not light, but probability. Transfer complete, one said. Anchor reassigned. I searched for my body. There was none. I was awareness without position. You have become pure observation, another voice stated. I felt anger even here. You promised equilibrium. Equilibrium achieved. Below us, time resumed. I watched Emily stumble backward as the younger me collapsed, gasping memory flooding into him all at once. He screamed my name, not understanding why it hurt. Then he forgot. The street unfroze. Snow fell. Cars moved. Midnight passed like any other. Emily was left alone, shaking beneath the streetlight, clutching an empty space where my hand had been. I tried to reach her. Nothing. She looked up suddenly. Her eyes met mine. Impossible. You can see me, I tried to say. Her lips moved. I feel you. The entities reacted instantly. Residual linkage detected. Sever. Pain erupted, not physical, but existential, tearing through whatever I was now. The layer containing Emily blurred. No, I tried to scream. The connection snapped. Emily fell to her knees, sobbing. I was dragged upward. Higher. Deeper. Perspective widened. I could see other anchors now scattered across time. Different cities, different years. People frozen beneath streetlights, clocks, doorways, all connected by thin, luminous threads. Not all volunteered. Some were chosen. Some were trapped. You are not unique, one voice said. You are necessary. I understood then the scale. This was not an accident. It was infrastructure. Time was not broken. It was engineered. And people like me were load-bearing supports hidden inside reality. How long, I asked. Undefined. Until failure. What happens then? The voices overlapped. Reconstruction. I watched centuries unfold. Civilizations rise and fall, wars begin and end, technologies bloom and vanish. I watched Emily age. She returned to Grant Street every New Year, standing beneath the streetlight waiting, always alone, always remembering just enough to hurt. I tried to scream. I tried to reach. I tried to forget. Time would not allow any of it, because I was no longer moving through time. I was holding it up, and somewhere far below, another invitation was already being written. The first anchor failed without warning. I felt it before I saw it. A sudden hollowing sensation, like a beam snapping inside a building that should not sway. Somewhere far below my layer of observation, a human mind fractured completely, and time lost its grip on that point. The result was immediate. A city I could not name folded inward on itself, seconds looping streets, overlapping screams, echoing on top of one another. Then the layer collapsed, sealed crudely like a wound, cauterized too fast. Time shuddered. The entities reacted for the first time with something like urgency. Stability threshold compromised. Reinforcement required. I understood then how fragile the system truly was. These anchors were not infinite. They broke, and when they did, time did not heal cleanly. I searched instinctively through the layers. Emily. I found her years later standing beneath the streetlight on Grant Street, older lines etched into her face, hair streaked with gray, but her eyes unchanged. She was holding something, an envelope, not cream-colored, black. The ink shimmered unnaturally. She had made a choice. Emily looked up directly at me. This time the entities did not stop her. "I hear you," she said softly. "How?" She smiled without joy. "I learned how to listen." She lifted the envelope. "They left this for me." I felt panic ripple through every layer of myself. "Do not open it," I tried to project. She shook her head. "I waited for you for years," she said. "They think time only breaks when people move." She laughed quietly. "They never considered what happens when someone refuses to let go." The entities surged toward her. Unauthorized interaction. Emily opened the envelope. Inside was no invitation, only a list. Names, hundreds of them. Anchors, past, present, future, including mine. She looked up. "You are not alone, Daniel," she said. "And neither am I." The ground beneath Grant Street split, not with amber light, but with darkness so deep it erased color itself. Time screamed, not metaphorically, literally. A sound tore through all layers. A vibration that made moments tear apart. The entities recoiled, containment failing. Emily stepped into the darkness. I felt something impossible. Hope. If anchors could choose each other instead of isolation, if connection could replace containment, the structure would change. Emily reached out. "Daniel." I reached back with everything I was. The layers bent. Anchors across the world flickered. Some broke. Some stabilized. Time lost its certainty, and for the first time since the beginning, it was afraid. Time unraveled unevenly. It did not collapse all at once, like the entities had warned. Instead, it began to behave like fabric, pulled too hard in one direction, thinning in places, bunching in others, tearing only where strain became unbearable. Cities drifted out of sync. I watched sunrise occur twice in the same street, while another place remained locked in permanent dusk. Trains arrived before they departed. Voices echoed before mouths moved. Deaths preceded births, then erased themselves. The anchors were talking, not with words, with sensation, with shared pressure and recognition across layers. I felt them awaken, one by one, minds realizing they were not alone, not cursed individually, but connected as part of a hidden network, holding reality together. Fear spread, so did resolve. Emily stood at the center of it, beneath the streetlight. Darkness pooled around her feet like ink in water. The black envelope burned away in her hands, leaving ash that floated upward instead of falling. "You can hear us now," she said. I could. Hundreds of voices layered into a single understanding. Anchors across time and space, linked through shared pain and purpose. The entities retreated to the edges of perception, their geometric certainty destabilizing. "This system was never meant to be seen," one of them said. "It was meant to function." Emily laughed bitterly. "So was gravity." "You do not fear gravity," I said into the layers. "You fear falling." The pressure increased. Without anchors, time fragments. With them it enslaves. Emily looked up. "Then we choose neither." She turned to me. "Daniel, if we all let go at once." I understood. A synchronized release. No replacements. No redistribution. No hierarchy. Time would be forced to resolve itself without human supports. The entities surged forward in panic. Catastrophic failure imminent. Emily raised her voice. "You already failed." She reached outward, and the anchors responded. Across the layers, I felt them preparing, loosening their grip on the moments they held, some crying, some praying, some smiling with relief. I hesitated. Fear cut through me sharper than any pain. If we let go, everything might end, or it might begin. I thought of Claire, of the boy, of Emily, standing alone for years. I released. The sensation was unlike anything I had known. Weightlessness, then free fall. Time screamed again, louder than before, but this time it fractured not around us, but through itself. The entities dissolved, their forms collapsing into probability noise, no longer able to impose structure. Reality convulsed, then steadied. I felt myself moving, actually moving. For the first time since the first midnight, I was falling toward somewhere, toward someone. The layers peeled away. Grant Street rushed up to meet me. I hit the pavement hard. Breath knocked from my lungs. I could feel my body. I could feel pain. Emily knelt beside me, laughing and crying at once. "It worked," she whispered. Around us, the city moved. Normally, clocks ticked forward. Seconds, minutes, hours without stutter. No street lights darkened. No voices whispered. I looked up at the sky. It was just the sky. Time had let go, or we had, but something remained. As sirens approached and people gathered, I noticed a small pile of ash on the pavement between us, and within it, a single intact card, an invitation, undated, waiting. The year finally began, not with fireworks or cheers, but with the quiet acceptance of motion. Seconds followed seconds, minutes stacked cleanly on top of one another. The world no longer hesitated at the edge of itself. I lay in the hospital bed, listening to the steady beep of a heart monitor that matched my own pulse. Pain anchored me to the present. A dull ache in my ribs, scrapes on my palms, bruises blooming where I had hit the pavement. Emily sat beside the bed holding a paper cup of bad coffee. "It tastes awful," she said. I smiled. "Then it is real." Outside the window, snow fell normally, drifting downward instead of hanging in the air. Cars passed. Pedestrians hurried, phones buzzed with messages that arrived exactly when they were sent. Time behaved. For days nothing strange happened. No whispers, no flickering lights, no gaps in memory. The city mourned nothing because it remembered nothing. That was the deal. Emily and I spoke often in the weeks that followed, trying to map the edges of what we remembered and what we had lost. Some details were gone forever. Names, faces, entire conversations reduced to emotional impressions. But we were alive, and time moved. On the night of December 31st, 1 year later, we stood together on Grant Street. No invitation arrived. No streetlight went dark. Midnight came and passed. Fireworks exploded and faded. Nothing stopped. I laughed harder than I had in years. We walked home believing it was over. It almost was. In March, I noticed the first article, a small story buried deep in the news. Several people across different cities reported the same recurring dream. A street light, a frozen crowd, a voice counting backward. The dreams were identical. Authorities dismissed it as coincidence. Viral suggestion, shared imagery. I felt cold. In June, a woman in another state vanished briefly for 6 minutes during a power outage. When she returned, she could not explain where she had been, only that she felt she was holding something heavy until it let go. In August, a child stopped speaking for 3 days after staring at a stopped clock. When he finally talked, he asked why time was afraid now. Emily read the stories with me. "It is spreading," she said. I nodded. Not breaking, remembering. Time had not been freed. It had been taught. Taught fear. Taught pain. Taught that it could be resisted. On December 31st, again we stood beneath the street light. Still nothing happened, but I felt it, a hesitation, not stopping, considering. As midnight passed, a breeze moved through the street carrying ash from somewhere far away. Emily squeezed my hand. "If it happens again," I looked at her. "Then we answer it together." Because time learned something that night. It learned that humans could let go, and that was something it would never forget. The story ends here. Thank you for watching and listening to the whole story. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to listen to the next stories.